my biggest advice or piece of info would be for postpartum. And it's to face mom guilt head on,
Mm-hmm.
because it's one of those things that can really limit us and make us feel like we're doing something wrong. And I think sometimes we kind of hide from those things like guilt, like we don't take opportunities and we don't do things for ourselves and we don't do things that kind of trigger that in us because we think we don't want to be a bad mom. But the beautiful thing about what we're doing as parents is we're not just raising babies, we're raising humans.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can challenge that mom guilt and show our children, like, hey, this is what it means to be a human.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Birth Story podcast. If you are joining for the first time today, I'm your host, Alexis C. Girl mom, angel mama to one of the sweetest boys in heaven, birth trauma and uterine rupture survivor, and former NICU mama. Here you will have the opportunity to ask and have your burning questions answered by professionals, feel connected to other women's experiences as we normalize the different aspects of this journey we are on as moms. The real and raw moments of healing are shared here as we navigate loss, embrace strength, and find hope again while learning to live after loss. Please note the topics discussed on this podcast are for educational purposes only. Please see your personalized medical professional if you have any questions or concerns that arise from listening, including diagnosis and treatment. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. You already know how obsessed I am with you and all of the work that you do. So I'm
Thank you.
so excited to have the opportunity to share you with everybody else. So to get started, I will give you the floor just to give us a little bit of info on who you are.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. This is so exciting and it's going to be fun for us to just chat for this time. I'm looking forward to it.
I agree.
I am Chelsea. I'm a body talk practitioner and a birth and postpartum doula. So I have like a fun little combo being able to bring both together. We work with a lot of somatic healing, how the body holds on to stress and tension and trauma, and also with the lens as a birth and postpartum doula, really having the opportunity to see how that is actively at play in the prenatal experience, birth experience, and also into postpartum. So I love everything that I do. As you know, I'm super passionate
Yes.
about it. Exactly.
So for those who don't know, what exactly is a doula and what is kind of your role and responsibility? Let's start in the labor and delivery room.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a birth doula, for instance, it's a non-medical birth support person. So, we don't do any formal medical support, but we're there for emotional support, mental support, physical support, and also advocacy because that can come up at times during the birth experience. We're very vulnerable in labor. So it's really important to have somebody there who is attached, but also not attached. So we can
Mhm.
still bring in some of those conversations and make sure that any questions that were discussed or talked about in the prenatal period are brought up during that active experience. Because when you're in labor, you're kind of in this little bubble.
Mhm.
So having somebody outside of the bubble who can like bring you information at the right time and give you the time you need and whatever else you need in order to come to decisions that make you feel informed and empowered in your experiences. Well, it's super important to me.
Yes, no, I love that. I feel like, too, just as someone who's been through labor, like it's almost like you forget everything that you've ever planned going into it. It's just like so overwhelming. And then your medical team is there for medical reasons and they have their protocols. And so to have someone there with you to kind of ground you and bring you back to your wishes that you wanted from the start, then it's a beautiful opportunity to have.
Yes, and also I feel like so much of labor is physical, right? We are
Hmm.
going through it. I like to refer to it as a marathon because it very much
Yeah.
is. And just like we train, if you were going to run a marathon, you wouldn't just like hop up off the couch and be like, I'm in, you
Yep.
know? So having somebody there to really like guide you and ground you in a way that really works for you. Because I think part of my training as a body talk practitioner, also being an empathetic person in general, just knowing what people need in the moment is really helpful because sometimes we do need like tough love. Sometimes we do need really soft support. And it shouldn't be up to us to figure that out when we're already doing such important and intense work.
Hmm.
So, my goal is what can we take off of the birthing mother's plate so that she can be as present as possible? Because, I mean, you're in it, right?
That's putting it lightly, yes.
The only way out is through. And like, that's true in life, but it is highlighted in birth. It's extreme.
I remember thinking back, and this is more so with my very first pregnancy, and it was towards the end. And I remember one day just like getting out of the shower, totally naked, looking in the mirror and being like, oh my gosh, like like, it's such a beautiful bump and blah, blah, blah. And then it's all like, holy crap, like that has to come out of me
Oh,
one way or another. There is two ways this baby's coming out. I'm such a planner, but then in the moment, if I get stressed or anything, I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know. Just like do like whatever you need to do to get this over with as soon as possible. So I feel like I really could have benefited from someone like you in the room to be like, okay, you know what? Things are good right now. Remember where we wanted to be and let's kind of bring ourselves back there. Cause I just went from 0 to 100. I'm like, just get her out. I don't care.
oh,
Like,
yeah.
I'm not taking any risks. Like, I'm over this pain. And there's all the unknowns too, right? Like,
Oh,
and even, I've been through it 3 times, and each time was a completely different experience. And so you don't even know what to expect.
yeah. And that's so true. I've also been through it 3 times and I was shocked that it was different each time. And I also think that we we prepare for their bedroom. We
Yeah.
prepare for what it's going to look like to have a little baby in our life, but we don't necessarily prepare for birth.
Mm-mm.
And this is a societal thing where there's this thought that, oh, everybody else has done it,
Mm-hmm.
so I should be able to do it too. But we don't really have those conversations of, did it work for you? Did it feel good?
Mm-hmm.
Those aren't part of the conversations. It's just kind of like, well, we just do it.
Yeah. And all
So,
of a sudden you have your baby and you're like, yeah,
yeah,
well, I guess we did
yeah,
it.
right? I love that these conversations are happening more now where we're
Yes.
actually talking about the in between
Mm-hmm.
being pregnant and having your baby, right? Is that there's so much more dialogue happening here. And I think it's really important because it
Yeah.
helps us to feel less alone in whatever variation of it we have. Especially, I mean, you've probably heard from people being like, I loved being pregnant. And then on the opposite side, I hated it.
Yeah. It's really one way or the other. And each
Yeah.
pregnancy is so different. And then to expect the labor to not be as different as each of the pregnancies, like that's so crazy. But I feel like once you know something, you're just like, yeah, that's just how it is.
Yep.
When the reality is, it can be night and day. And you have no idea until, like you said, you are in it and you are
Exactly.
going through it. What kind of different types of labor have you supported?
I'm a full spectrum doula.
Hmm.
I have supported planned C-sections, emergency C-sections. I've supported people who want to go unmedicated and people who are planning to go fully medicated.
Hmm.
And kind of everything in between. How I like to operate is we always set a birth plan. And I think it's great to like sit down and set intentions because that kind of helps us to like take a breath and be like, okay, I have a plan.
Hmm.
And then from there, we're kind of just constantly assessing whether or not the plan is working, whether or not we're coping well. Because I think that plays a lot into how we perceive our experience. Is if I choose unmedicated and the entire time I'm not coping well, then I could perceive the experience as being awful,
Yeah.
right? even though I did it the way I wanted to, we
Mm-hmm.
could still experience it as a trauma. And as best as we can, I mean, mothers are the most important people in the world, in my opinion, because we wouldn't have people without them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nobody would be here without them.
Exactly.
So
There's a reason we do
there's
it.
a reason we do it, and they need to be like honored and valued and,
Yep.
just respected so much in that experience. And I don't really have any requirements for how birth has to go. I really like to focus on what would be the ideal birth for everybody that I support. Because to me, at the end of the day, if my clients feel like they were heard and they
Mm-hmm.
were respected and they feel empowered, however it plays out, to me, that is what's most important. That's what leaves that lifelong impact on their experience, not only in labor, but also they carry that through postpartum. If
They
I felt
absolutely, yeah.
like right? If I felt
Mm-hmm.
like no matter what happened, I was a part of it and I made choices and decisions, then when I leave that experience, I know that I can do that now.
So many birth trauma stories that I have heard, a lot of them have to do with I was not heard, I was not listened to. They told me birth is hard. And it's like, yeah, it it is so hard, but it doesn't have, like, it's not supposed to be so traumatizing,
Yeah.
and to have someone there to support you. And like things go wrong and there's always turns, or like you said, if you have a certain birth plan, as an example, unmedicated, and then you decide this is way too much and you go medicated, to know that it's okay to make those changes. Just because it wasn't your ultimate birth plan does not mean, I'm going to use the term failed. It does not mean that you
Yes.
failed in it, right? Just because you expect it to be something else, and you do not have to commit to that. If something feels different or it feels wrong in that moment, even if you believed up until that moment that that was going to be the right thing and that's what was going to make this birth magical, it might not always be the case.
Yeah. And how much does that mirror life?
Yeah,
It's just like
truly.
an intense, very quick version of that
Yeah.
in that grand scheme of sometimes we do have to pivot. And I always like to highlight for everybody I support is that there's two people involved here. You
Yes.
can only control your part, but
Yes.
baby has a plan of their own and we can't control that. And they're going to prove that to us time and time again as we're raising
Yes.
them too.
I feel like it starts from the moment you conceive that baby. It's like the shots are called by them.
Absolutely.
Whether or not we like
Absolutely.
it, we approve of their decisions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they make liars of us constantly.
Literally.
I just feel like if we get the opportunity to feel that in birth, that softens it for postpartum, where,
Hmm.
it it's like whatever energy we leave that birth space with is what kind of imprints on postpartum.
Hmm.
And I think that is the responsibility of the entire birth team. And sometimes, like you said, because people are focused on the medical aspect, we lose the humanity in that. And I really think doulas act as inserting humanity back into birth because
I
that
love
shouldn't be
that.
the responsibility of the parents. They're
No.
busy.
In terms of supporting, whether or not it's an emergency or a planned C section, I would like you to talk about that. Even on my socials, when I see, and it can be a lot of first time moms and recurrent pregnancies, but the fear that is surrounding that, whether or not it's planned, or if they're so beyond scared that their birth is going to end in a C section.
Yeah.
How do you support them through that?
Yeah, that's a great
Hmm.
question. To talk about emergency situations, one of the first questions we ask, and this is based on a past experience where a client they were experiencing failure to progress, is what is like the medical term for it. And I suggested that they ask the doctor how much time they have to make the decision on a C-section, because the doctor came in and was like, "You're going to have a C-section." And then she started to feel like nervous, panicky,
Hmm.
because, well, you're always looking to protect your baby the minute you see those two pink lines, right?
Yes.
That kicks in immediately.
Yeah.
So then when the doctor came in and she asked, "Well, how much time do we have?" He said, "You got 6 hours." So that was our first big, for me as a doula, my first big moment of like, wait, what is defined as an emergency for C-sections? And so that started to be the foundation for asking those questions, is how much long do we have? And then coming back to the mom and being like, where are you at here? Like,
Yeah.
what can you tolerate? What are our options here? And in the more emergency situations, it's really important for everybody to have all the information. Hey, this is how it's going to look. This is what's going to happen. These are the options. You can still choose to or not do this. I like to give too much information so
Yes.
that they can take that information and know that whatever they choose along the way is totally okay. For instance, one of the things that can happen is that the medication that you're given during a C-section can make you feel shaky.
Hmm.
So a lot of moms in their mind are like, I want to do skin to skin immediately. And I like to just say, hey, you might feel shaky. And if that happens, it's okay if you want your partner to do skin to skin just until that shakiness goes away. And so them having that information, they're like, oh, this isn't something I'm doing wrong or
Hmm.
that I'm doing bad. This is just an effect of medication on my body. So for me, it's like, how much information can we give somebody to prepare for whatever they're about to go through? And we have more time to do that in the case of a planned C-section, whether or
Yes.
not they've had one before. Just try to, again, really bring the emotional aspect into birth, because it's there whether or not
Hmm.
we want to see it or feel it. It's there with us. So to prep, if somebody knows they're having a C-section, we have conversations about like, hey, how are you feeling? If it's deviating from the plan that they thought they would have, then we like to kind of go into that a little bit more to make sure that every part of them gets to feel seen and heard in that experience, and that they're not a part of it.
Hmm.
Because sometimes when you have a C-section and you didn't want it, you can feel like choice was taken away from you.
Hmm.
And nobody likes that feeling.
No, just to have
Even,
like the reasoning behind it, like why are we having to make this decision? And again, walking through what it's going to look like. And that can be one of the scariest parts is the fact that it is a major surgery. And that alone, like I know the first time I went for my C-section, I had never had a procedure outside of having a tooth pulled. And I was
yeah,
like, okay. And I'm about to go in for my first ever surgery with no preparation, nothing. I remember laying there and being like, okay, so like, when are we going? Does my husband have time to go get the stuff from the car to put in our room? They're like, no, like, we're going now.
yeah,
Okay, so I'm going to meet my baby in like 10 minutes. This is so quick. And again, I had zero prep of what that was
yeah,
going to look like, and not fault on my team. I know we were having unstable fetal heart and things like that. So ultimately, they were there for baby.
yeah,
And even my nurse prepping me, because, well, they don't let the husband in the room while they prep you. And I learned that very quick. All I remember is the OR doors flapping kind of shut and like making eye contact with him. He's petrified. I'm petrified. Nobody for me took time in that moment to explain it. And
yeah,
I am the type of person leading up. Kind of, but mostly after, as I'm reflecting on everything I could have and should have asked. And so,
right.
definitely in a moment of stress, I'm not there to be asking the question. I am
No.
just like, somebody just point me in the right direction. So, to have someone, like you said, is physically removed from the pain and the overwhelm of that situation to be there to kind of be that voice in your ear, like, hey, maybe let's inquire about this and then you can choose XYZ, right? And
Yeah,
that is extremely powerful, is to have that extra voice just there protecting you. Whether or not what that answer is from the medical team. If, say, they're like, no, we need to go now because baby is maybe not compensating, then okay, that's totally different. But at least to have the opportunity to feel even comfortable enough to
Yeah.
ask. It's like that
Yes.
comfortability and advocation.
Yeah.
So I feel,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
I feel we can be scared in those moments because you pick a team, you trust the team. And I know a lot of people said, oh, your body knows exactly what it's going to do. It's just going to go in there and deliver this baby. And then when it doesn't do that, and the team is making all these decisions for you, and I hope at the end of the day that they are the best decisions and that's what needed to be made. But if you're not even comfortable enough to speak up and be like, okay, well, someone want to let me know what's going on, or why are we doing this? To have that opportunity is so important, like you said.
Absolutely. And historically, women have not had a voice
Mm-hmm.
in labor and birth. They used to do something called twilight births, where they would go into the hospital, they would put them to sleep, and they would wake up and their baby would be in the nursery. And, they had no idea or no voice or no opportunity to have a say,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're like doing this for the first time. This didn't happen a long time ago. And like you said, we do trust our team. We do trust the people that are there to help us. But at the end of the day, are we looking at people in just one way, right? If we're
Mm-hmm.
just looking at people like medically, well, we know humans that we're so much more vast than just one thing. We're a collection of so many different things. And I think we still want them to do that, right? I want my medical team, I want them to be cocky. I want them to think like,
Yes.
I am the best. Like, give me a doctor with a God complex.
Yes. Yes. That's not afraid to make the damn call.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm not saying that that doesn't have value, but I'm saying that we can't take away the entire other part of the spectrum if it can all come together. And I really think that that's what doulas offer not only the parents, but also the medical team, is that bridging the gap between the two. Because, sometimes a doctor will come in and they'll say something about what's going on and it'll sound extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But then having a doula in the room to be like, oh, this is what that means. It's like, oh, okay. Well, that's not as scary as I thought, right?
Yeah, I think we almost get so caught up in what textbook versions of things look like. That's kind of what we hyper focus on sometimes. And then just again, to be so caught up in that and for you to bring that holistic approach back into it. And then I feel not every doctor, but a lot of doctors get so comfy with the nurses having their back and being like, well, I'll let you know this, but my nurse will follow it up with, okay, now we're going to connect on you're not a medical professional, so I'm going to explain it in layman's terms. Whereas
Right.
the doctor's like, just says that their spiel and they're like, okay, yeah, that's all the information they need because that's how their brains work. So when you said, then I can kind of explain a little bit more. And so you have a bit more of an understanding. And two, physicians work fast. And so they're in and out, they're in and out and in and out. And so to really bring everyone back to slow down just a little bit in those moments that is safe to do so, we all need that.
Right. Right. And I think too, to speak to even the nurses are incredible. I've had so many amazing experiences with nurses, and how we can work together has been awesome. I will say though that especially since COVID, we have shortages. They
Yes.
don't have the amount of arms or people to be able to even give that same level of care that they could before, where they could like sit and explain. So we're dealing with a crisis here where
Mhm.
now a lot of times these people are left in the room for 12 hours, 14 hours on their own. They've never done this before, you
Mhm.
know? And any time we're vulnerable to be left alone in that, it's not supportive, it's not conducive. And it's, again, not on the nurses. I mean, they're doing the best they can with what they have, but in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, we're struggling with
Yeah.
having the number of people that we need on the floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's been a few hospitals where they have one nurse or two nurses running all of the maternity ward. That's hard on the nurses, but that's
Yes.
also so hard on the parents, and everybody's suffering for that, right?
Yeah. I think it's so busy too. When I had my last delivery, I was at the Royal Alec, a huge hospital in Edmonton, Alberta, and I was on the antepartum unit, had went into labor, and I was not allowed to labor. So then they immediately rushed me to labor and delivery. And my nurse was still cleaning that room. She's like, yeah, I literally just delivered a baby and now we're going to get you going. And I'm just like, have you had a breath? Like, I know I'm also a concern here, but I'm concerned about you. And she was like, nope,
Right.
it's all good. We're just going to do this. And then I'm in one room and there's a woman on the other side and a woman on this side, and I can hear them both pushing. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ. It's like,
Chaos.
is everyone okay here? Like, and I
Right.
mean, the nurses too. Like, are you guys okay? And my OB came in. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I wanted to come in sooner. But yeah, I'm sure you just heard that delivery. I'm like, sure did. And I'm really happy at this point I'm going for a section because that did not sound fun. Just waiting for my
Okay.
husband to get there, watching my NST. I'm like, good Lord, body, please just hold on so we can go to this OR. I'm like, oh my God. Oh, it's so funny. Okay. So I had this question on my list and I posted on socials asking for other women's input. And the top question I got is, how do you support the partner?
Yeah.
I think this is so overlooked. So many times we just expect that person to just be there, hold the leg, hold the hand, whatever it is. And it's maybe not, we're not all slowing down to take a moment to check on them, whether it's prenatal, during delivery, and especially postpartum. So, what does that look like for you in supporting them?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm so glad that not only you're asking it, but that everybody else is asking it too.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because I totally agree. I think that they can often be overlooked. And I'm going to nerd out for a second and share that the research that they're starting to do on men, especially on dads, is that their brain matter also changes when after conception, when there's a baby, and it changes again when the baby's born. So whether or not they have like that same physical changes that we go through, their body is biologically changing and it will never be the same once they are a parent. It's pretty cool, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also something that kind of goes overlooked because, we can all agree that women are doing their fair share.
They are.
But what I like to do and what I like to talk to with all of my clients about is that how I see the birth experience is that there's a bubble and it's around mom, baby, and dad, right? And my goal is to keep everybody in the bubble and keep the bubble from popping, which means that everybody needs to be okay. So for dads, one of the hardest things is that men are biologically wired to protect.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the opportunity to protect in the labor experience, and that can be something that they experience for the very first time is there's nothing I can do here. I can't fix this. I can't solve this. That is stressful.
Yes.
That helplessness is intense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can really leave an impact or a mark on them and affect how they feel in the postpartum period. Can I do this? Can I be what they need? I already felt so helpless, right? So my goal is I teach a lot in the prenatal period about, hey, this is what to expect. I also created a birth course and I created PDFs for, hey, this is every stage of labor and this is what it's going to look like and this is what you can do to help.
I love
And
that.
yes, and I love it because it's like take a screenshot, have that in your
Mm-hmm.
phone. If you're like, what do I do? Then you have that anchor point.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in the labor experience, I'm monitoring everybody. I'm just keeping my eye on everything, whether that's water from mom or water for dad, or if we're told, hey, like mom's at 4 centimeters. I'm like, would you like to go for a nap? If anything changes, I'm going to come and check on you and I'll come and tell you, like, it's go time. You're not going to be left out of this, but the more rested you can be, the more you can have the resources that you need, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Even if things are going on for a while and I'm like, would you like to go run and get food? I will go run and get food. What do you need? Do you need fresh air? Do you need to stay? And I'll go. But
Mm-hmm.
just making sure that everybody's needs are being met and that he's also given the tools that he can use to support. Because sometimes what I love about labor is that a lot of times, we're taught from a young age as women to be nice and be kind and don't make anybody feel bad, don't leave anybody out, right? And
Yep.
in labor, you're suddenly hit with this power and you're like, I don't like that. Don't touch me. Don't look
Yeah.
at me. What are you eating?
Why can I hear you breathing at this point? Like, could you not?
And so partners are like, this has always worked. Why is it not working suddenly, right?
Yes.
So I'm there to be like, okay, this works. Try
Yeah.
this. Or, I noticed that she responds better when you squeeze her hips versus doing the counter pressure. Why don't you try that?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always going within their comfort zone. Like if a spouse isn't comfortable with watching an epidural, okay, well, you go stand at the front, I'll stand at the back, no worries. Or
Mm-hmm.
based on where they want to be, do you want to cut the cord? Okay, awesome. You don't want to cut the cord? No worries. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just making sure that whatever part of the birth process, whatever they're comfortable with, that they really get to experience it 100% of what they want to, and that they feel like they are making a contribution and they can be that protector that they inherently are driven to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we can take out that feeling of helplessness, then the more empowered they feel in their experience. And to me, it's so important for both people to leave that way, to feel like, hey, I got this. I did
Mm-hmm.
that, and I can do whatever comes next.
Get a little bit of sense of control back in the moment where it's literally everything's taken away from you and you're just like, okay, this body's going to do what it's going to do and we're just going to have to take it as it comes. So those little things that we can control, let's grab a hold of that and make those decisions.
Yes, and those things are going to change.
Yep.
You know, it might work for 4 hours, it might work for 15 minutes. No worries. We'll find the next thing and we'll
Mm-hmm.
find the next thing. And I love that you say that about control because
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the affirmations that I'll use a lot of the time is that when we're coping well, I like to remind everybody like you're in control. You've got
Mm-hmm.
this. You're on top of it. You're right here. You know, I'm not saying that it doesn't hurt. I know some of the holistic birth communities will be like, don't talk about contractions as being painful. There's surges. Let's not lie.
Yeah. They're painful as hell, actually. A
Right.
surge of pain. You're totally right. But we cannot forget about that very important P word, okay?
Right. Because if we're not prepared, then whatever it is, let's say it's not very painful, but if I'm expecting no pain whatsoever, any variation of pain is going to feel intense because I wasn't prepared. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
ready. And if you don't mind me sharing like my first experience with
Please
labor.
do. Yes.
So with my daughter, I watched this documentary called Orgasmic Birth. And if anybody gets a chance to watch it, I would recommend you do because they talk about how basically baby travels down the same nerve pathway as an orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, biologically, it's supposed to trigger the same sensation as an orgasm. So I watched that documentary pregnant and I thought, yep,
It's supposed to be the best
I'm
moment.
in. I'm in. That's the one I want.
Ruining it for every man ever. Oh my God.
So I did the hypnotherapy, the hypnobirthing classes, and I worked on like subconscious beliefs and patterns that could inhibit that process. I did everything because I'm like, yes, give me an orgasm
Yeah.
while I'm in labor. That is what I check mark, I'm
Why
in.
isn't everybody doing this?
Right? So then when active labor hit and I was experiencing pain, I was devastated. It was so hard for me to accept my reality.
Like, please only watch this if you've already had your babies. Let's
Wasn't
just
that bad. No, I want to
preface
preface saying it wasn't that bad, but I was expecting an orgasm.
Yes.
So so that's what I mean is, it was tolerable. I did it. I
Yeah.
got through it. I was able to like come around to the fact that, oh, contractions, I'm feeling a sensation of pain, not pleasure. It's not a surge of pleasure with each contraction. Like just for your brain, if you're expecting one thing and
Yes.
then like, have you ever went to take a drink of water and you accidentally took a drink of pop?
Yeah, it's offensive.
It's offensive, and it's not like you hate the pop. It's
No.
like that is good, but I was expecting hydrating water.
That is
And
not what she got.
and that is what I mean is it wasn't something I could cope with or handle, but I was expecting something entirely different. So I never want to set people up in that same way to think, "Oh no, it's not going to hurt. It's like no, you're gonna feel it. However,
Mhm.
you can handle it, you can cope with it, and if you can't, we can take different steps so that people don't have to like cope with it the same way I did, being like, okay, this isn't bad, but it's not pleasurable.
All your dreams just crushed in this single moment that then continued for a few hours.
Exactly. I know my
Oh my
midwife laughed
God.
at me. She was like crying, laughing.
That
And
is literally me right now.
she's
It's
like,
like,
wait, what?
you thought what? Oh my gosh, that is like, I'm sad for you in that moment, but like, that is amazing.
And you have to watch the documentary because you'll get it when you watch it. It's
I
like,
will.
excuse me? Excuse me? That sounds amazing. I don't know.
I know the truth already. I go BS.
Do you imagine? They're all just faking. Never has happened to a woman before.
Never? We're not good at that at all? Okay, fire me. I'm gonna get canceled before I even start. Usually I bring tissues because I'm gonna cry and I didn't bring any and now I'm crying because I'm laughing. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that.
I've never shared that publicly before, so I'm sure you can guess why, but it seemed fitting.
It is extremely fitting, and I am thankful for the opportunity of you sharing this. Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, now that we're over faking orgasms, how do we support in the postpartum phase?
I'm glad that you asked.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, that was
okay.
my favorite moment of today. Slash,
Too. I
I
needed
finished.
that. That was
My
great.
cheeks hurt.
Oh, don't you love? It's so nice being
Oh,
able to laugh at your own self.
literally, I'm like I said, this is an open and honest space. If you can't handle it, not the place for you.
Oh, I love that. Like, come on in,
Yeah,
warning, you're gonna love
yeah,
it.
we're gonna overshare because chronically that's what I do. So
Oh, I
saddle
love
up.
it. Yeah, I love oversharing.
Right. It's like once I start, like I just can't stop.
I know. I'm like, oh, this is just the beginning. We'll see what
Yep.
else comes up.
Organic conversation.
Yeah,
Authenticity.
love it.
I am who I am, okay?
Yeah.
Take me for face value.
Yep, exactly.
Will not disappoint. Okay.
No, it's entertaining. Come on, that's what this is for.
Right? I'm not here to be bored.
Oh, no. Not here to be bored. I love that. I'm gonna say that more. That's what you should caption
Not here to
this
be bored.
episode. Yeah, I love that.
The big O.
Yeah.
For those of you who can't see us, it was in quotations. Oh my gosh.
Oh shoot.
It's too good. It's too good.
It is. It is. Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Oh,
Okay. Okay, Chelsea, focus up.
bring it back.
So postpartum, how do I support postpartum?
Yes.
One, that's another area that I struggled with because, like you, I'm a planner
Mm-hmm.
and I did all the things prenatally, like I told you. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. And for birth, I was very prepared. I felt like I knew what to expect, I knew variation, I was quote unquote ready for it, as ready as you can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But postpartum, I did no planning. I did no preparation. I just kind of thought that was going to be the easy part. The baby was going to be here, and that was just going to be it. So I really struggled with aspects of my identity and aspects of how to ask for help. You know, growing up as the oldest in my family, I never really knew how to ask for help, even because I was more of the helper.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're stressed out, and I think that society struggles a lot with this aspect that we expect people at their worst to be cognizant enough to ask for what they need when they're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And putting that expectation on any vulnerable person, I think is a huge injustice to
Mm-hmm.
them and to their experience in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I one of the things I did was created this fourth trimester workbook and guide. I have it as a free resource on my Instagram page that people can just click the link in the bio and they can access that themselves. I recommend you go through it in the prenatal period and just start to think about what makes me triggered. Does mess trigger me? Does not having meals or, does not doing self-care or not having like the little joys? Like
Mm-hmm.
what triggers me? What makes me feel like not seen or heard or important? And if we can start to be aware of that beforehand and start to write those things down so that when people come over, when people ask, how can I help you? We can just take a screenshot of that picture and send it to them. Or we can just put it on our fridge or leave it on our counter so that we're not having to be in the trenches and then also add more to our plates. Because anybody who's ever struggled or went through something hard knows that when somebody asks you how they can help you, sometimes it feels like now you have to do more work.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need? And sometimes we're so disconnected from what we need. We're just trying to make it through. So we're just doing what is required.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do that before, then that can help to set us up. So I'm really huge on preventative with my postpartum care, which sounds kind of funny, but I like to make sure that we just check in what looks like help to me, what looks like support to me, what feels good for me, especially when I'm stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And we can involve the partner in too. What do you notice she likes? Like, does she like to be touched when she's stressed? Does she like when you cook a meal when she's stressed? Like, does she like to be asked questions like what is the thing that works for her? Because I always look to the partner because they do know you best, right? Out of everybody else, they know you best. So it's always nice to like create that open conversation of how do we cope best? And also asking the partner, what happens when you're stressed? Do you shut down? Do you work through it quickly? Does it take you a while? We really want to be able to bring in those aspects of our emotional well-being as well as that mental and physical because we just ran a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how you brought your baby into this world, you ran a marathon. You're healing, and that's when we need the most support. That's when we need the most people rallying for us. And if we can set up some of that beforehand, like some people like to meal prep, that feels good. Now we have these food services like HelloFresh and stuff. Like even that, sending a friend a subscription to HelloFresh
Mm-hmm.
is just such a love language, right? Of like, I got you, you know?
Everybody at work got together and got me like these crock pot meals that were frozen, and you just literally throw it in and you walk away. And food is such a love language for
Yeah,
us. If I'm going to catch up with a girlfriend, we're either going for coffee or we're going for dinner. That's the only time
absolutely.
you'll see me, okay? Or I'm cooking at my house or you're cooking at yours. Like,
Yeah,
so I think that's so important. And leading back to asking for help, I think so many of us women, even before we have babies and stuff, we always just like do it on our own. We don't
I know.
necessarily ask for the help because it's like, oh, well, you got your own going on. I'm not going to put mine on top of yours. And then when you have kids, well, you're going to do everything you can for them. So you're just going to do the whole picture by yourself. And I think too, in the preparation for postpartum, I'm I'm on TikTok and a lot of these influencers were preparing in quotations for postpartum, and it's packing the little crate that you're going to bring around your house. That is the preparation that they do. Nobody can prepare you for walking around in a diaper for X amount of weeks. You and your baby both. Like we be out here
Yeah.
matching. We're swollen, we're sore, we're bleeding
We're
way
leaking.
longer than we want to admit. We're trying to poop. We're like,
Absolutely.
it's
We're
not,
praying.
yes. And above all of that is nobody can ever prepare you for the hormone crash once that
Oh,
placenta is delivered. And not enough of us talk about that. I myself had completely forgotten until I was literally deep into the earth of the trenches of postpartum. And my OB buddy was like, I think you're forgetting the hormone crash that you just went through. And for you to even expect that you are just who you were prior to this, that's ridiculous. You can't even
yes.
put that expectation on yourself. I love that you go through and you say, what do you like? What triggers you right now? And then after, we don't know how exactly we're going to show up.
No.
So you can come back to that and be like, oh, maybe this isn't what I want right now. Or this sounds really, really good. Let's emphasize that on that list. And to have that when your friends come over, I think that's awesome. I know I'm so guilty. I was like, just bring yourself. I just need
Yeah.
good conversation, and they come with like a coffee or a bag of food or something. And when they get there, you're like, oh my God, thank you.
Right. Well, and you make a great point, and I just want to dive deeper into that to say that, if we think about how we show up for the people in our life and how we want them to know that we love them and we support them, it's a disservice to not give people the opportunity to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we feel like, oh, I don't want to inconvenience them, or like you said before, put more on their plate. But sometimes giving them the opportunity to be like, hey, that's how you're going to feel love at this time. I want you to know I love you.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes a turkey bacon club, I'm in.
Yep. Right?
So it's also giving people the opportunity to love us the way that we love them. And that can be, it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable. It's uncomfortable for us to put ourselves out there and say, hey, I need help too, you know?
Yeah, and it's so funny to like even think back, just asking when you're in the position to have to ask. Because if I'm going to someone's house, I'm like, you either tell me or I'm just showing up with something and I hope to God you like it. Like, so just do me the favor of just telling me. And
Yes.
but then when the roles are reversed, you're like, well, I don't know. I get so exhausted in postpartum of like you're
Mhm.
being up in the night and you're learning this new human and everything. I can't even think about what it is I want right now.
Yeah.
So like to prepare and do those things prior to, and then reflect back, like, oh yeah, okay, that's the one that I would like right now. How about we do that?
Yes. Exactly. And I think I love what you said about the hormones because in labor and in postpartum, in pregnancy, we're going through surges of hormones
Mm-hmm.
and they're all beneficial. They all have a job and a role to play. And it's fascinating the way that they actually are supporting us, but we just aren't being taught about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, the things I've learned about hormones, I've learned on my own. And it's not just common practice or common knowledge. Like one of the things in labor, your body releases hormones to help you cope with labor as your body transitions into each stage, which I find is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't feel so cool. If
Yeah.
anybody's ever hit that transition period, your body's releasing adrenaline into your bloodstream. But what happens when you're hit with adrenaline and you can't move,
Yeah.
right? Like we hit fight or flight, but we can't
Yep.
do anything about it. So we'll say things like, I can't do this, or I'm out, or let's pack
Mm-hmm.
this up and do it tomorrow.
Yeah. Change of plans. I don't want to do it.
Because our body has to process that adrenaline in some way. It has to be able to work through it. So we do that verbally, we'll get shaky. All of these things that if we're not prepped for, that can seem really scary. And postpartum, like you said, we go from having hormones for two people to suddenly dropping down to hormones for one person.
Mm-hmm.
That is very intense. The body experiences it as a loss. And baby blues is typically the body's way of processing that loss, that grief.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is added to if we go through anything traumatic or if there's additional grief in the birthing process. Now we're dealing with that and what the hormones are doing with the body. So it's really important for us to know, like, hey, this is normal what the body is doing, but we still have to feel it and go through it in order to come back to that balance. We can't skip those steps. So if we know about them and we're supported through them, it can also feel more tolerable versus if we internalize it and think, oh, this means there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where you go right back to, especially as a woman, we put so much pressure on ourselves and you just want to feel normal again. Like, oh, I'm not pregnant
Yes.
anymore. I should just go back to who I was. And they even talk about symptoms of the postpartum anxiety or the postpartum depression and that kind of thing. You kind of not like laugh it off, but it's like, yeah, okay, I've heard of it, but it's not going to happen to me. And then when you're
Right.
in it, you're almost in it so quickly that you don't realize until it's too late and you've cried the last week all day, every day, and you're just like, what's going on? I should be happy. Oh, a girl I follow, one of my girlfriends, she had posted the other day about looking back on her newborn album and looking at herself and be like, I'm not happy. And that happened to me. We got our newborn album back. And I remember calling one of my girlfriends and being like, I'm going to send you this album. I think I'm in my head. I'm being too hard on myself, but that's not happy me. I feel like I'm the happiest I've ever been right now. And then she's like, yeah, no, I agree. She's like, that's not the Lex smile where your eyes are gleaming and your cheeks are about to burst. And
Hmm.
it's like, what is wrong with me? And it's like, I think I forget. And we were in the hospital for so long. And so we're finally home. And I almost feel like I'm out of that 6-week window, but it's like coming home was a whole different game. And it's like that's when those emotions really, really hit.
Yes.
With that being said, how long after into the postpartum period do you generally follow your moms? And when do you kind of notice, and even for yourself, if you've been through this, the anxiety or the postpartum depression or anything like that, how like long after did you find that those symptoms really came to life, or were noticeable, I guess?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up your experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. I think again, I think I keep coming back to this point that we can't just isolate all the different aspects of what makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
We can make a plan, but if things don't go according to plan, we have emotions there too. We have the physiology as well. And all of these different aspects need to be nurtured along the way in order to make the postpartum experience as best as it can be.
Mm-hmm.
You asked about like what the timeline should look like for when we feel normal is such an interesting word.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I really think about it, I want to know who invented it and what it's supposed to mean
Yeah.
and if it's even real.
Yeah. Fake
Because
news. I call BS.
fake news, I agree. I'm like, how weird can we be? How not normal can we be? And I think that birth has a way of shaking that up for us. Whatever we tried to be before, when we had all the energy and all the time and all the resources, now we can't spend that extra time. So, who are we really underneath all of that extra editing that we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do, right? And for all of my mom's postpartum, I'm always give a year, give yourself minimum of a year. And that's if you're not breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
If you are breastfeeding, we still have those same hormones going through the body. We're going to have to tack on some extra time there. And I think that this is a way more realistic timeline than 6 weeks. I also make sure that all of my moms know, like, I am here for you, for however long. Like if you randomly text me at 3 a.m. and you're like, things are not good, I
Mm-hmm.
will be there for you. This isn't linear. This process isn't linear. Life isn't linear. And, we need to know that we're supported through it all. And another area that I think that our medical community isn't doing moms justice is waiting 6 weeks to book that first appointment. Because so much can go wrong in 6 weeks. So much can go wrong in 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say a mom really wants to breastfeed. Well, a week can make a significant impact when we're talking about latch, when we're talking about milk extraction, all of these things. And it's common for mothers to internalize these experiences as failures when it's not them who failed, it's the system who failed them.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like to highlight that if you're not getting the support that you need, it's not your fault. Like you did
Yeah.
nothing wrong here, you
Yeah,
know?
because it's on us to go and seek out those resources and
Yeah.
find those people to assist with us. And again, I think, like, I know they do the postpartum screening and things like that at the 6 week, but I feel like the main focus is physically, how are you healing? How are you feeling? And do you want birth control? And
I
those are
know.
our three things. Yeah, okay. Are we happy, sad? What's the mood like? And maybe some practitioners would be different if you were like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm not doing great per se. Personal experience, I've never felt like, I'm not going to say not great, but I've never had any of those symptoms like going into my 6 week. For me, it's always been later than that.
Yeah.
And so
Which
it's
is
like,
typical.
yeah. So when I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, no, all is good. I just could use some sleep, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
so it's more focused on these other aspects. And they're like, oh, feeding's going great or feeding's going good. Yeah, I guess. Like, I don't really know, define that for me. Baby's eating, I guess. Does it feel great? No, there's some pain. But again, they're like, okay, well, that's what a lactation consultant is for. And you're like, okay, well, so where do I find that?
Right.
It's like lining
Yes.
up with those resources and making them readily available. And even if they are available, wait lists are so freaking long for
I know.
everything.
I know. Well, and not only that, but let's talk about the screening, for instance, like when you go do that first baby check, right? And they
Yeah.
make you like do the checklist. I don't know if you had that.
Yep.
And it's like the questions on the checklist, I like had a laugh with the nurse after my first baby, it's like, does it feel like your life has changed considerably? Do you feel sad? Do you feel like you're not coping well? Are you tired? It's like, yes.
Hell yeah.
If anybody's answering no, they're lying. And we feel like we have to lie because we don't know what's going to happen if we tell the truth, right? And the reality is, life completely changes after we have a baby. And if we were just told that, and if that aspect of us was nurtured, and instead of being like, your life has changed, it's over as you know it, we could say, like, hey, like this is everything is new. And how exciting is that? That now this is an opportunity to reinvent yourself. Who are you
Hmm.
now? Who were you always? But, you know, you just thought you had to be something else. Now you just don't have that same amount of energy
Yeah.
to hide or temper yourself, right? So, yeah.
I even remember when I was working on the postpartum unit, and I had taken that like so personally of my own experience of like that postpartum depression. And this was only after I had my first daughter. And I had a mom, and she was quite young. I want to say she was 19 or 20. Have you ever like experienced anxiety or any of those symptoms prior to? And then I would talk about the postpartum anxiety and stuff. And it was almost like, yeah, all right. And I'm like, no, like I'm taking a serious moment here because like they come on
Yes.
so fast and you won't even know what's hitting you
Yeah.
until you're so far into it. You're like, okay, well, that would have been nice to kind of deal with in the beginning. So just trying to prepare people for that as much as we can. I know it's a hard one to even wrap your head around until you're there and you're in it. Um, so I love that you're there to kind of help normalize that.
Yeah. And I think that the more we know that, like, we're all kind of walking through this and going through this, and nobody really knows what they're doing. And what's right for every person is entirely different. That's why
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a doula who's like, this is the one way I practice. Like I do see my doula practice through the lens of body talk, through the lens of somatics and like trauma release work and all of the layers. So I think that gives me the advantage when I'm talking to people because I'm able to really like take myself out of the equation and see people for who they are and what they need and what's best served for them and their family. Because at the end of the day, that's my motive. That's my driving force is, hey, what will it take for you to feel like you've got this?
Mm-hmm.
Because you do, and how can everything else rally around you to really lift you up and make it feel possible? Make it feel like exactly what you want or what the goals are for you and your family, that that's realistic.
I
And
love that. But like sometimes I just feel like people can get so not stuck in their ways, but only see it through one lens. And then it's kind of comparable to like that medical team that they're like, they're there and they see through their lens and kind of their lens only because that's their
yeah,
responsibility. And so for you to come in and be able to see it from a multiple different ways and really incorporate that, I think is extremely important and so useful for moms going through this.
yeah. Well, I just think, you know, we're all just doing our best. We are, and we have these humans and we want the best for them. And that's the foundation. And, you know, I think people can get caught up in what's the right way or the right version, but life is so, it's truly so gray. And if we can just let it be gray, then it can feel like easier to navigate. But if it has to be black or white, we're going to struggle. That conflict is going to affect us and it's going to affect our relationships as well. So the more we can like build capacity for the gray, I think the better we can be not only in our roles that we play in our family, but also in our relationships outside of our family too. And I think there's value there to know that, like, you know, instead of being like, oh, are you doing this? It's like, oh, is this working for you?
Mm-hmm.
Are Like, are you happy? Oh my gosh, I'm happy. This is so good,
Yeah. And have
Instead
the
of like,
conversations to better support each other. So I know that's one of
yes.
the biggest things is like, so pretty much every mom I've ever talked to, they're like, this felt so isolating. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but we're all going through it together. Some of us the like exact same thing, like
Mm-hmm.
obviously different experiences, but we're all going through it. And so to be willing to have the conversations, but a lot of the times it's hard when you can't even make sense of it in your own head to then go and try and verbalize to someone what you're going through. But
Mm-hmm.
had we taken the time to do that, you would know the mom sitting next to you would be like, girl, same.
Absolutely.
Our partners, our husbands, the dads, like they don't understand on the same levels. And
Right.
there's many, many, many supportive partners out there, but it's truly not until you have that mom to mom or woman to woman conversation and connection that you truly get that support and kind of that push you need to get through it. And
Yeah.
yeah, realize that you aren't alone.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do as humans is choose connection. And that takes vulnerability. It's hard to say, this is exactly where I'm at, but that's that sparkle, that's that trickle effect where everybody feels seen and heard.
It's a
And
beautiful thing
mm-hmm,
when you can
mm-hmm.
find that connection and that community. And, there's nothing more powerful than a group of moms that get together and have been through similar experiences. And I mean, they can take on anything.
I mean, come on, women wouldn't have been burned at the stake if we weren't powerful.
Right? Let's go.
Woo!
um, you've given a lot of examples throughout us kind of chatting, which I love, but what are some like specific key takeaways that you've taken from births you've supported, your own birth experience, and how have you implemented those into your practice of supporting moms in the present?
Honestly, I am a very introspective person, so I do like to take a moment to look at basically everything that I go through or that I support somebody through and think like, what is the lesson here? What did I learn here? What did they learn here? What did they need more of, less of? Like all of these things along the way. And when it comes to supporting people, what I have learned over time is kind of tying it back to what we started talking about is it matters less about, what we think is right and more about what people need in the moment and learning and knowing that sometimes what they need isn't what you think or what they think and that letting it be messy and figuring it out as you go is okay and sometimes it's better. Also, as you probably know from this conversation and from, I mean, our relationship before, is that there's so much value in humor. I used to
Mm-hmm.
think I had to be so professional and that I had to be so like put together. And I found the more I've allowed humor to kind of integrate into whatever it is I'm doing, that it's so healing. Like laughter is so healing. Crying is too. Every emotion has value,
Yeah,
but
it's
there
there
is
for a
something
reason.
about yeah, there's something about being able to say the right thing at the right time and the right moment to just completely take out any nervousness or tension in the body. It's
Mm-hmm.
laughter, I think, has become one of the most powerful tools that I use, and it takes work to properly time it. That doesn't just come naturally.
But I think too, like not forgetting that even in like specifically a labor room or anything we're doing, that we're all human beings.
Mhm.
We're all somebody else in that room that maybe we are day to day, and that we all love to laugh. We'll probably cry if I'm not laughing.
I might do both.
Yes, there's a high chance I'll have tears streaming and you'll just be confused. But I love that. Like I think it's so important and to bring lightness to these, heavy situations and again, time and a place, but I do think it is so important. And I'm obsessed with you and everything you do. Anyway, I started with that, but I've never actually had the opportunity to kind of dive into, like, we've done lots of body talk together, and
Mhm.
I absolutely love that. But to dive into this side of it, like, I think I personally never had a doula for my births, and you've just opened up my eyes and my outlook so much.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk
Yes.
about this. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for your podcast. It's going to
Thank
go on my
you.
favorites.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what area do you actually serve? I'm not even sure I know how far you travel.
I serve oh gosh, I kind of call myself a traveling doula because I'm
Yeah.
anywhere from like Lloydminster, Viking, Cold Lake. I've gone to Edmonton. I kind of am like, where are you going? Okay, I'll
Yeah.
meet
I'm
you there.
I'm here for the ride.
Yeah.
Um,
Traveling in a vehicle without children, as you probably know, is like,
yes.
oh,
Grab your
like so
favorite
much.
drink, blast that music or the Beyond the Birth Story podcast, and just
Exactly.
go.
Yeah.
Something that has come to my mind is, have you felt in a hospital setting a welcoming environment for a doula perspective in the room? Like, what has that been for you?
Honestly, I feel like it's been quite good because, again, I am able to really like read people.
Hmm.
And my primary goal is to like set my ego at the door, you know, which
Yeah.
is very helpful to be able to like put on a hat and take it off because sometimes if you approach with curiosity and you lead with curiosity, then you get further than you might if you kind of come out heavy-handed or a little bit too firm. So
Yeah.
I find that typically I have good experiences because I'm always leading with a question. Oh, you know, if she doesn't want to push on her back, is it okay if we start like this? Or I wonder what would happen if we tried her knees together. Wouldn't that be cool to just find out? Like,
Yeah.
we're all here anyway. Or if mom is like, I want to wait 4 minutes or 5 minutes to cut the cord, I'm like, well, you
Is
know,
baby okay? Mom okay? Like, let's
let's
wait.
chill. Let's
Yeah.
chat, you know? So I
Yeah.
find that having that approach where I'm aware of kind of everybody's energy or I guess vibe you could say in the room, then you kind
Yeah.
of are able to just make sure that everybody feels like we're a team. Because that's my big thing. Let's be a team. It's about these two people are entering the room, they're coming out of family. Like everything else is deal withable. But
Yeah.
this is what is the most important is how strong is that unit when it leaves the space. And that that moment impacts a person for the rest of their life.
Yes. You
Yeah,
will never stop reflecting back on that.
absolutely. So how can we create that space that just feels
Yes.
good or consistent or safe the whole time when, you know, some people having giving birth is like the first time they're in the hospital. And then, like you were saying, the surgery, having a C-section could be the first surgery
Mhm.
they've ever experienced. There's so many unknowns. So to have something that is solid and steady and that is there for you no matter where you're at, I just feel like everybody deserves that as a baseline. I think it's a baseline for what people deserve, you know? Whether or not they want it, they deserve it.
100%. And I think that you are um very accepted in a room such as a labor and delivery room because you have that outlook. From a medical professional, every day after shift, and we're taught this in nursing school, is you reflect back and you take like, okay, what went really good today? What could have went better? And how are we going to learn from this? Or everything that we're doing. I'm constantly watching my coworkers and things like that and be like, oh, why'd you do that? Or like, hey, that's really cool. And, being willing to learn and not showing up like, everything, and nobody could teach you
Yes.
something new. Like, there's going to be something new every day. And I'm trying to think of this quote that I seen, and it's probably somewhere in my notes section on my phone. Um, and it's something along the lines of having a safe birth should not have to be a point on your birth plan or something like that, like there are so many other things that you have to worry about, like, oh,
Yeah,
I just hope I have a safe delivery. It's like, no, you should be guaranteed a safe delivery. Like, you should show up
absolutely.
and your team should be there to ensure that that's not even a question for you.
Right.
Like, you should be worrying, yeah, if your knees are going to be together, if you're on your back or your front, are you using the peanut ball or you're bouncing on the big round one? Those should be your concerns. What they're going to name the baby, Oh, I wonder how much the baby's going to weigh, how big they're going to be, like, just, yeah. So that, I don't know, it popped into my head at some point, that quote. So I think that's really
Beautiful.
important. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
and to speak on that safety and even what people should have to be thinking about in the room, it's just not, I think that we can do so much better. I think that we can do so much better for families and for mothers so that, like you said, is a baseline for them. And there's this one quote, I think her name is January Harsh, and she says, I do not care whether you birth in a hospital, in a birth center, or in the woods beside a baby deer. I care that you felt empowered, you felt heard, and that you felt like you mattered.
yes, I
And
love
that,
that.
and I am roughly quoting this. It's been a while. It's been a while. But the intention behind it is like that is totally how I feel is whatever version you choose. Like if one day I get to support a woman who gets an orgasmic birth, I will be happy.
I would like to hear her story.
I will send her your way.
Oh my gosh. I always come back to that word empowered. So I feel like that's one of the things I grieve from my deliveries is obviously my first one I went in C-section because of meconium and unreliable heart rate. Second was a stillbirth, and then third was a 28-week emergency C-section. And at no point did any of those give me the opportunity to feel empowered. And then at some point in my journey, I ran into a woman who literally pushed her baby out. She crouched over herself and she pulled her own baby out in the hospital room. Her doctor let her do that. And I'm like, that is one of the most empowering things I have ever heard. And it doesn't always have to be that extreme, but to at least give somebody a moment to reflect back and be like, in that moment, wow, women are incredible. I did that.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I made it through 3 C-sections. That's pretty cool too. But
it's amazing.
to never get that moment to be like, wow, I can't believe I did that, So
Hmm.
just to have people around you supporting you in that room and giving you the utmost chance to have that moment,
Hmm.
you can't ask for anything better. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's so important. And for people like you to be willing to sign up to do this line of work, it takes a special person. Really, truly does.
Yeah, I am obsessed.
I
Love
can
it.
tell. I can
I
totally
love it.
tell. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important. If people want to find you, if they want to find a way to contact you or these amazing, incredible resources that you have taken the time to come up with,
Yes.
where can they do that?
You can find me on Instagram. It's at Life and Birth Wellness. And if you go into my bio, then you can see like all the options that I have in that little fancy drop down bar. Pocket Full of Doula is the prenatal course I created. I just wanted that to have, like, even people who didn't want a doula present, I just wanted them to feel like they had a doula in their pocket so that they could access these videos, access these resources, and just be able to feel like they had all of that information, regardless of what they need for their next step. You can also contact me directly. I love talking about these things. I love these conversations. I book doula meet and greets where people have the opportunity to kind of like feel me out and see if I'm the right fit. It's kind of like dating, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
you know, oh, yeah, this feels right, or this isn't this isn't it for me. I don't want to laugh during birth. No.
I won't be orgasming or laughing. That's like a terrible time.
No,
At
no.
least let me laugh at this point.
Right? You know what? I wanted to touch back because I think you also asked me this question. And just also, thank you for sharing your experience and what you felt like was missing in your birth, because I
Mhm.
feel like a lot of people share that. And even a lot of clients I've supported, just because you have a doula doesn't guarantee that it's going to feel like the that there isn't any grief that comes
Mhm.
with that experience, or that things don't go in a way that isn't according to plan. But, sometimes if we can look back and see, like, was there any moment where it felt like I made a call, or I showed up for myself, or, you know, was there any moment where I felt that like humanity or that connection? And sometimes that can help to ground the experience and just increase our capacity there,
Mhm.
because we're going to feel it all. And the hard stuff, the heavy stuff, that is what hits harder. But sometimes we can see those glimmers in the in between.
Mhm.
And if there's even one glimmer, if somebody dimmed the lights, sometimes that can feel like, hey, I remember that happened. I
Yeah.
remember there was humanity there and that felt good, you know? And sometimes it's often that we revisit those events and we revisit those moments. And if that moment can soften even a little bit, that can support us. And even on that note, you were asking me before about postpartum and like what my biggest advice or piece of info would be for postpartum. And it's to face mom guilt head on,
Mhm.
because it's one of those things that can really limit us and make us feel like we're doing something wrong. And I think sometimes we kind of hide from those things like guilt. Like we don't take opportunities and we don't do things for ourselves and we don't do things that kind of trigger that in us because we think we don't want to be a bad mom. But the beautiful thing about what we're doing as parents is we're not just raising babies, we're raising humans.
Mhm.
And if we can challenge that mom guilt and show our children, like, hey, this is what it means to be a human, it means feeling guilty and still showing up for ourselves, feeling tired and still showing up for ourselves. And our kids watch that along the way. And I think that the older you get, the more you realize cliches are true, which is so annoying.
It
My
really truly is.
my 20-year-old self would be like, liar.
Mhm.
But it's like that one, like, do as I say, not as I do. It just doesn't work if we're living and we're challenging those parts of ourselves that we're kind of afraid to do because we want to be seen a certain way. But if we think of long term for our kids, if they see a mom who was like making sure that her needs were met and making sure to fill her cup and still loving us and still doting on us and still going the
Mhm.
extra mile, that she was included, I just feel like that's so powerful. It is realistic to say if the most important person in my life is here and I am equal to them, that is realistic. We can like conceptualize that and be like,
Mhm.
I can do that. I can be equal to the people I love the most. And that's just saying, if I'm going to make my kids soup, I'm going to make me soup too. If I'm
Yep.
going to make sure they're hydrated, I'm going to be hydrated too, And it doesn't have to be these big moments. It's just in the million little ways that we can show up for ourselves and we can start to soften that mom guilt. And like any muscle, the more we use it, the easier it gets.
And I feel too like we get so focused on raising our kids that maybe we forget that we're still raising ourselves too at some point.
Yeah.
We're growing up together and we're doing it together. And so to give ourselves grace that we're learning just as much. So this is our first time being parents too. So we're not going to get it perfect.
Yes. And that's not the point,
No.
right? Because, I mean, if we get it perfect, then what are the expectations we're putting on our kids?
Right? And we would never sit there and tell our kids that they weren't good enough or they weren't doing this good enough. So why would we look in the mirror and say that to ourselves, right?
Right. And if I need 5 minutes or if I need to put my noise canceling headphones on during a 47-minute meltdown, that seems fair.
Yeah, absolutely. The overstimulation is real.
It's real. And ladies, put that on your postpartum wish list because they have changed my life.
Mm-hmm. You need them.
You need them.
Well, my final question for you was, what would you tell a mom deep in the postpartum trenches, if you want to call it that, or just deep in postpartum? And I mean, you kind of answered that a few times over. So is there anything else? Well, I know there's lots that burns your heart and you would love to scream from the rooftops, but is there anything that if you were to end this call, you'd be like, you can sleep tonight?
Okay, thank you. I love that you preface it that way because there is.
Hit us with it.
I think something beautiful about this journey of motherhood is that it is expansive in all ways and we feel everything, right? Like the joy is deeper, the beauty is deeper, the sadness is deeper, the grief,
Mm-hmm.
everything we feel so deeply. And my advice would be as best as you can to let yourself feel it all and feel it so deeply because it's a gift. It's hard,
Mm-hmm.
but everything about it, it's about the joy and the sadness, and it's about the laughter and the anger and all of it in between. And, the more you can let yourself feel it all, the more your body will be able to integrate the experience. And at the end of the day, that's going to feel better than just kind of trying to push away the stuff that doesn't feel so good, because there's magic there too. Like there's magic in the mistakes and there's magic in the learning and the growing. And there's magic in the beauty. There's magic in the joy too.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you can expand the capacity to feel both, like that's just what I wish for everybody, is that we don't beat ourselves up for the hard times and we let ourselves go there, because then the beauty is so much more beautiful. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're going through a hard season, or if you're struggling, or just even having a moment of struggle, I just hope you let yourself just experience it, because the next time you feel the opposite end, which you're going to, is you're going to feel it so much deeper too, because you let yourself. And yeah, that's just what I hope everybody knows, is you're not alone in the deepest and the darkest, and you're not alone in the most beautiful either. So if you can stretch that capacity, I think that's what it means to be a human, and that's kind of the gift of being a mother too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Please take a moment and on whatever app you're listening to us on, press that follow button to stay up to date with all future episodes. If you or someone you know are interested in being a guest on the Beyond the Birth Story podcast or a sponsor, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at Beyond the Birth Story podcast and send a message or fill out that contact form. I would love to connect with you. As always, remember to be gentle, kind, and hold space for yourself when you need it.